Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read this month. Starting with a book that I'm going to be talking about in a lot more detail very soon, so I won't be saying too much in this video, but this is Nickleby by Charles Dickens. Nickleby is the third book in Charles Dickens' bibliography, and it tells the story of the hero Nicholas, whose family loses their wealth at the beginning of the story when the patriarch of the family dies. Nicholas and his family fall on hard times and have to rely on the help of Ralph Nickleby, which is Nicholas's uncle, his father's brother. And Ralph is a very unsavoury character and does everything he can to try to ruin Nicholas's life and stop him from becoming wealthy again. And the story basically follows Nicholas as he goes through many adventures trying to make his fortune. I really enjoyed this book, and I think it's a big improvement for Dickens over his first two books. Not to say that those two books are bad, but I think that what Nicholas Nickleby does really well is it takes the fun pastoral themes of the Pickwick Papers, combines it with a more plot-focused book like Oliver Twist, and creates something superior to either of those books. One of the issues that I had with Pickwick Papers was, although it was very entertaining and the characters were very colourful, I did find that the pastoral, episodic nature of the story sometimes made it hard to really invest in the story. I do understand that that's kind of part of the narrative, that's the whole thing about pastoral books, that's what they're like, but for me that's just not my preferred style. I do prefer a story, even if it's quite episodic, if it has an overarching narrative. And by having Nicholas seeking his fortune and trying to make his way in the world, you get that in this book, but you also get the episodic stuff as well, and you also get a lot of the humour from the Pickwick Papers here as well. With Oliver Twist, I liked that book in some ways, but I did find that the plot didn't quite work. There were too many coincidences, and Oliver as a character was a bit weak, whereas Nicholas as a much more vibrant presence in the story that he's in, a much better improvement over Oliver Twist. So overall, a really good book. I'm still enjoying reading Dickens novels, and I'll be talking, like I say, about this book soon in future videos as well. Next up we have a play by Sophocles Ajax. This play gives the tragic end of the Greek warrior Ajax and the aftermath of his death. It takes place during the Trojan War, but towards the end of the war, after Achilles has died. Following Achilles' death, there is a debate about who among the soldiers should get Achilles' armour, and Ajax believes that he should get the armour, but King Agamemnon and his brother Menelaus decide to give it to Odysseus instead. Ajax is outraged by this, seeing it as an insult on his honour, and so he decides that he's going to kill these three men. The goddess of Athena intervenes and sends Ajax insane, and he kills the entire flock of the army along with the herdsmen. The story then deals with Ajax realising what he's done and the aftermath of this as he commits suicide, and then there's a debate about what should be done with Ajax's body, with Odysseus stepping in and telling Menelaus and Agamemnon that even their enemies have to have respect in death. I was really looking forward to this play. Having read the Iliad and seen Ajax as a character, it's always interesting to have a play that goes a bit further into the Trojan War so you can see more of what happened. It's interesting how much moral conflicts of a particular kind come up in the Greek plays. In particular, I'm thinking here of conflicts between your obligations to the state versus your interpersonal obligations to each other. And the debates about Ajax and what to do with his body, whether he should be treated like a traitor or like a friend, is something that also comes up in some of Sophocles' other works as well, like Antigone, where Antigone is in a very similar situation, where her brother is going to be left outside the city to die, and she has to decide whether she's going to allow that to happen or whether she's going to bury him with the respect that a brother deserves. Another interesting thing about this particular play is how some of the characters are presented and how differently they're presented from other Greek plays and also the Iliad and the Odyssey. Odysseus in particular, typically he gets treated in a not very flattering way by the writers who talk about him. He's usually portrayed as quite shrewd, cruel, cunning, and he's really hard to relate to as a character because he just doesn't seem to be an especially good person. He seems to take delight in deceiving people and just doing some sometimes downright terrible things. But in this play, Odysseus actually serves as the moral compass. Although Ajax tried to kill him and failed, Odysseus recognizes this, but he doesn't think that Ajax deserves a undignified burial, and he actually advocates for a respectful burial of Ajax, despite the fact that they are enemies. So it was interesting to get a different side to Odysseus in this story that we don't usually see in other Greek works. One thing that is quite similar though is the treatment of Agamemnon and Menelaus. In every Greek play that I've read, more or less, these two tend to get treated quite badly by the writers. Agamemnon in particular is always treated as pompous and slightly ridiculous. The only exception I can think of here is in Aeschylus's Oresteia, where Agamemnon gets a bit more of a sympathetic treatment. But generally he's treated quite badly, and I think that's partly because he just tends to do terrible things. You know, in the Iliad, he steals someone's prize, and this is what causes Achilles' rage. And here, although it's not clear that Agamemnon has actually stolen Ajax's prize, but again, it's him doing this sort of thing where he's giving something to someone else who maybe doesn't deserve it as much, and then this triggering massive events. And in typical style, Agamemnon refuses to take any responsibility for his role in these things as well. You'd think the idiot would learn, but clearly he doesn't. If you've read Sophocles' more well-known Oedipus trilogy, you might want to give Ajax a try. Next up we have a reread, and that is Donna Tartt's The Secret History, which I'm currently rereading for a book club. This fantastic book tells the story of Richard Papin, who goes to an elite university and falls in with a crowd of elites studying the ancient Greek world. And we know at the beginning of the story that these friends have killed a member of their friendship group, and the book leads up to this murder and then follows the aftermath. And the students themselves are very enamored by Greek culture, and they want to tap into the Dionysian crazy rituals that the Greeks took part in. But they do this without really understanding these forces, and this causes terrible things to happen. I'm definitely going to have to read The Secret History at least one more time and do maybe a video analysing it, because I think there's a lot that you could talk about with this book. The connections to the ancient Greek world, its connections to tragedies, which I'm seeing a lot more this time, because in the past when I've read The Secret History I'd not read any Greek work at all, so having now read some and then reading this book, I can see the connections much more clearly, and I'm finding the book even more enriching for that reason. And what I like about The Secret History is it captures this sort of romantic idea that we have about the intellectual world and wanting to be, you know, a part of this university culture where you're party to this forbidden, seemingly forbidden ancient knowledge, and it sort of makes you feel superior to others, and that's attractive but also very dangerous. And I think that Donna Tartt is really good at capturing both the attractiveness and the allure of that kind of world, but then also showing its dark side, because you have these characters who are enamored by the Greek world, they get sucked in, they think they understand everything, and it turns out that they really don't understand anything, and that they should basically leave well alone. So I like that sort of tension, because I think it really captures something real about how people feel about those kinds of things, but also captures the terrible consequences as well. That being said, I don't think it's changing my mind in terms of my recent Donna Tartt ranking videos. I think I still would put this as her second best work, because I do find that there are still some things with The Secret History that I think could have just been done that little bit better. I do think that the characters aren't as compelling as the characters in Donna Tartt's other books, and there are just elements, I mean, like Richard as a protagonist, I just don't find him as engaging as her other protagonists, but these are just very small gripes. Overall, it's a fantastic story, and it's very, very readable as well, so if you haven't read it, definitely give it a go. And last on the list, we have me carrying on with my Dickens, and so we have the next book that he wrote, which is The Old Curiosity Shop. Again, this is a reread for me. It's the first time I'm reading it on paper. I listened to it the first time, and I really enjoyed it at the time, but now I'm reading it, and it's a good book. It tells the story of little Nell and her grandfather. He has a gambling problem, and this leads him and her to lose the curiosity shop, which is basically just an antique shop, and they are forced to go out and have lots of adventures while they are being pursued by someone for money. Well, several people for money. It's a pretty tragic book. It doesn't end very happily. Infamously, and I'm sure everyone should know this if you know anything about Dickens and his works, little Nell unfortunately passes away at the end of the story in a scene that caused absolute shock, tremors through Victorian London at the time. From memory, it's hard for me to say how this one will turn out. I think I'm enjoying it more maybe than Nicholas Nickleby. I think one of my issues with Nicholas Nickleby as a book is that, like the Pickwick Papers, it's a light book, it's quite comedic. There are dark moments here and there, but overall, it's quite a light story. I do prefer something with a bit more substance to it, and The Old Curiosity Shop has this. It's still got Dickens' comic characters that he's very well known for, but it's also got some pretty dark villains like Mr. Quilp, the man who is pursuing the old man and little Nell for money. He's an incredibly terrifying villain, terrible person as well, and them two being forced out onto the streets and just living basically a terrible life for most of the book. It's some pretty dark stuff. It's more in the vein of Oliver Twist, although it does still have some of that sort of episodic comedy that Dickens obviously does very well. I'll be interested to see as I progress with this one how it turns out on the second read, whether I like it more or less, but so far I'm enjoying it a lot, but I'm not that very far in, so we'll just have to see where that one goes. And that is it for everything that I read this August. Let me know down in the comments, what have you been reading this month? Have you been enjoying what you've been reading this month or hating it? And what do you think of any of the books or plays that I've talked about today? And that's it for this video, so take care everyone. Ta-ra!